Hello, welcome to Birdsong and the Dawn Chorus. I'm Jamie. Now, as this is a Zoom webinar, you won't be able to turn on your video or your microphone, but you will be able to ask us questions using the Q&A box, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can. We have time allocated for a Q&A at the end of the session, but if we don't get to all the questions, we'll try and answer the questions after the webinar and share them after the event. The presentations in this session are being recorded. And if you have any technical issues, there is someone from the events team with us today who may be able to help. Although for some Zoom related issues, we may not be able to offer any support. Apologies if your reminder email gave the incorrect time for this webinar. We hope you haven't been waiting for too long. Now, it's International Dawn Chorus Day this Sunday, nature's fantastic big free festival for all of us. Over the next hour, we'll be finding out how to identify birds by songs and calls, and we'll be looking at birds you may be finding or hearing in your garden or local green space. We'll also be hearing about some of the birds whose springtime songs make up part of the dawn chorus in the Atlantic or Celtic rainforest on the western side of the UK. We'll also meet brothers Axel and Ari Adrioli, who are following the journeys of migratory birds through Europe and Africa, recording the songs and sounds they hear. First of all, we're going to hear from Tash Ballantyne, who's on the RSPB Youth Council. Tash, welcome. What might we hear a little bit closer to home?
Hello, Jamie. Yeah, thank you. So I've compiled, let me share my screen, 6 garden bird songs that you'll hear locally. They're easy to identify no matter if you're the avid ornithologist or just the occasional bird watcher. I like to come up with some silly ways of remembering them, so hopefully they should stick. So let's get started. So first up we have the wood pigeon and the collared dove. Now I've put them together because they're quite similar, although their songs are quite distinctive. With the wood pigeon, it almost sounds like he's boasting around the garden, sort of walking around saying his name. So it sounds like he's going, wood pigeon, pigeon, wood pigeon, pigeon. Let's give that a listen and see if you can hear it. So yeah, that's how I always imagine the wood pigeon, sort of walking around saying his name. Whereas the collared dove, I sort of like to think of them as footy fans. They're sort of chanting United, 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 which is a little bit of an issue for me because I'm a Liverpool fan. But yeah, very distinctive. Let's give it a listen. United, United. So yeah, quite similar, but very distinctive if you listen carefully. Up next, this is the wren. So the wren is my absolute favourite garden bird. It's a small bird, but it's really, really loud. And I like to think it's got a bit of a Napoleon complex because of this. So yeah, its song itself is really fast, high pitch. It's quite a long song. So the most identifiable key bit of the song is sort of like this machine gun drill in the middle. Let's see if you can listen out for it as we play it. There it is. Yeah, so if you listen carefully, it's a long song, but you will absolutely will always know it's a wren when you hear this sort of drill machine gun sound. There we go. So moving on, we've got the great tit. So they've got quite an easy 2-tone rhythm. It sort of sounds like a squeaky hinge on a door or a tire pump. It's quite reminiscent of me, of like a foot pump when my parents would use one to blow up the lilos on a beach holiday. So yeah, really characteristic. Let's see if you can hear it. Yeah, so very much sort of like a foot pump noise. Now, The chiffchaff is quite possibly one of the easiest birds to identify. Again, similar to the great tit, it's got sort of an even two-tone rhythm, but it's really easy because it literally says its name in the song. It's literally going chiff-chaff, chiff-chaff, chiff-chaff. So let's give it a listen. Chiff-chaff, 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 chiff-chaff. Let's see if it'll do it again. So yeah, really characteristic, and yeah, quite a nice beginner bird to start off with. The chiffchaff is the one I started off with, just because when you're walking through the woods, you can literally hear it saying its name. So yeah, nice simple one. And finally, we have the robin, the UK's favourite garden bird. Now, I was trying to think of a really silly way to remember the robin, and I came up with one method whilst listening to one. Not only do they have sort of like a high-pitched song and it's quite twittery, it almost comes across as that they're trying to tell you a really exciting news or a really exciting story really fast, and because they're trying to tell you so fast, they sort of pause for a moment before going back to talking. So yeah, it's like Twitter songs, pause, Twitter, pause, sort of like that. So yeah, let's give it a listen. And pause. So yeah, the robin's great because, yeah, as I said, he's trying to tell you a story almost too fast that his mouth can't keep up with the words that his brain's producing. So yeah, and you can hear those all year round. Yeah, so really good one to learn. And yeah, these beginner birds are great to start off with. They're the ones I started off with. And you almost want to catch them when they're not singing all together, because it can be quite hard to identify. But yeah, when they're by themselves, it's really good and really easy. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Tash. That's brilliant. You taught yourself all this, didn't you? Any tips on how people can teach themselves birdsong?
Yeah, I'd say, as I said, sort of going out in your local woods or green space. The dawn chorus is a great time to listen to it, but everyone's trying to sing their song at that time. It's quite hard to pinpoint a particular song to listen to. So yeah, I recommend just going out into your local park, green space, woodland, and just picking one song and just trialing them one song at a time rather than sort of all of them at once. Lucy Lapwing, she does some great lessons on YouTube. That's how I learned some of them. And yeah, as I said, if you make it silly, it kind of sticks in your head a bit better. So at least it does for me. But yeah.
It really does work that way. And actually talking about the dawn chorus, I suppose if you got really early while it was still dark, you might hear the robin singing, because they can sing throughout the night, can't they?
Yeah, it tends to be the robins and the blackbirds you hear first. So they tend to be quite good ones to start off with. And yeah, the robins are all year round. I know people associate them with Christmas quite a lot, but no, you will hear them all year round.
And talking about great tits, so one thing I know when we rehearsed this and we were sort of talking about the great tit, they have different accents, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later on in this session, but they sound slightly different. It's always that bicycle pump, isn't it? But they sound slightly different in different parts of the country.
Absolutely, yeah. As the others will probably discuss, that you can sort of hear the regional difference between the birds, which is really interesting. So I always sort of go with the foot pump or the bicycle pump, and that way you know, even if it does sound slightly different, that it's a great tip.
Have you got a favourite bird song at the moment?
Oh, always the wren. I absolutely love the little guy with the Napoleon complex. He's the one I hear first. I walked up to uni this morning, and that was the guy I heard. Yeah, they're my absolute favourite. And that little machine gun sound, it's always so characteristic, and you just know it's a wren.
Excellent choice. Thank you ever so much, Tash. We're going to move on now to Ben Porter. Ben is an ecologist and a wildlife photographer working for the RSPB in Wales. He's made this short film for us on birds that you might find here in the Atlantic forest. We're going to show the film first, and I'm going to have a little chat with Ben.
Just listen to that. Isn't it amazing? I'm really privileged to be based in the middle of Wales, right in the heart of some of the most amazing Celtic rainforest habitats, these beautiful ancient oak and birch and hazel forests that adorn the steep-sided, really wet, wooded valleys in this part of the country. And these habitats have some amazing different bird species, some of the common garden and woodland species that you can see almost anywhere in the UK, which have been singing away very happily for the last few months and been filling the dawn chorus with their superb songs. But there's a really special suite of species that arrive back from their overwintering grounds very soon. In fact, I've just in this last week started hearing them again, and I'm going to be showing you a little bit about those for this year's International Dawn Chorus Day. So what are these really special species? Well, I'm going to tell you. Wood warbler, pied flycatcher and common redstart. What a selection. If you go to these forests at this time of year through April, May and June, you will hear these and you will hopefully catch a glimpse of them flitting through the greening canopy and understory of the forests. So let's start with the wood warbler. Have a listen. These lovely relatives of the chiffchaff, the willow warbler, some of these species we're really familiar with. They'll often be found just under the canopy in the understory of the forest. They love a little bit of open space and they'll often be doing a song flight from branch to branch. And they'll give off this song that sounds, it starts quite slow and ends in this beautiful trill at the very end. So it goes, it's a really lovely song, very distinctive. It pierces through the sound of rivers and the sound of rustling leaves in the forest. You can really hear it through the woodland. To try and picture what that sounds like, I often think of it as like a sort of falling body of water down the river, or perhaps something falling down the stairs, or like a coin gradually coming to rest if you flipped it over. So, really beautiful song. Next up, we have the pied flycatcher. These gorgeous black and white birds flitting around the understory of these wooded environments. And they've got a really gorgeous melodic song that seems to just really fit with these amazing forests. It's got a chiming, sort of slightly sweet sounding quality to it. Have a listen to this. So it's not a huge amount of complex things going on there. It's got quite a simple structure to it. It sounds like maybe it's not putting that much energy into it. It's like bleep, 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 bleep. That's a very poor outline, but it doesn't sound particularly complex. Some elements sound a bit like great tit sometimes when it starts to sing, and it often just falls into this really lovely chiming melodic song. Some of the maybe similar species that you might hear in this sort of environment that sound similar are things like great tit doing all sorts of impersonations, and maybe some sort of warbler, a bit like maybe a blackcap or a song thrush singing away. But it's got just a really sweet sounding song, and you can often pinpoint the birds from in the understory as well. So the last of this wonderful trio of woodland species is the redstart. Really flashy red colouring underneath.
Temporarily stopped Ben's video there by accident, so hopefully it'll start up again. If not, let's bring Ben in and we'll have a little chat and we could try the video in a few moments. Ben, are you there?
Hi Jamie.
Hello. That's absolutely brilliant, really enjoying this. Hopefully we can go back and catch the redstart in a moment. But I think it kind of shows that if you go to a different place, you know, you venture out of your garden, you go to a wetland, you go to a woodland, go to a cliff, you're going to get an entirely different sound experience, aren't you? What's so special about this environment, do you think?
That's a good question. Yeah, so I mean, these particular forests mainly found along the sort of western seaboard of the UK, and for anyone that's been to Wales, the wetness of Wales is quite distinctive, and it's actually that moist and high level of rainfall that creates these amazing woodlands, these temperate rainforests, and it's the species that you get living on the other trees that make it such a special environment. And then that in turn has created this habitat that things like the pied flycatcher, redstart and wood warbler then rely on for their nesting, breeding habitat, really.
And these three birds, I I think are they're not doing terribly well, are they? What would you say is the sort of current conservation status of wood warbler and redstart and pied flycatcher?
Yeah, so they're I believe at least pied flycatcher and wood warbler are now on the red list for species of conservation concern in the UK due to recent population decline, some of it like quite stark population decline.
Yeah.
And we believe it's due to quite a variety of factors. So as you'll know, they're migratory, they spend their winter in areas such as, sub-Saharan Africa. And as such, they're subject to quite a lot of different impacts along the whole of their migratory route, as well as then potential impacts on their breeding grounds and all of the factors that may play into whether they have a good breeding success and a successful season or not. So things like climate change are really impacting them on the breeding grounds and shifting the timings of things like leaf emergencies on trees, and then the caterpillars that then feed on those leaves, and then not having coincided their nesting time quite correctly to the sort of peak abundance of caterpillars. So there's some quite fundamental shifts that they're really struggling to adapt to at this point because of the rapidity of change that we're seeing. But then you also have all these sort of things along migration, illegal hunting in some areas of Europe, as well as changes to climate on their breeding grounds. So there's a whole bunch of things that are thrown their way that definitely have quite an impact upon them.
It's quite worrying, isn't it? How would you, I mean, to make the most of them, how would you go out and experience that kind of dawn chorus? What time do you need to get up? Do you need to be up, before it gets light in order to go into these woods and listen?
It's a good question, actually, and it's not quite as scary as maybe quite a lot of people might be expecting. Obviously, coming up to dawn chorus day, I'd really recommend people do get up for the crescendo. 4:30 is probably about right at the moment where we are, because you want to be up at least an hour before sunrise, really, to hear the real peak of dawn chorus. But for these, for these areas in the woodlands, things like pied flycatchers, redstarts, wood warblers, they're singing throughout the day. Actually, you can hear them throughout the whole of the morning. They've only just arrived, so they're quite anxious to establish their territories. So they're not just singing at dawn; they are singing throughout the morning. So you can perfectly happily hear them at those other times. But I'd still encourage people to get out at dawn because there's usually a lot less sound pollution as well going on at those sort of times of day. So there's a much stiller, louder, sort of good soundscape to be out to listen to them, and it's just a special time of day.
It is, and I think there are different levels of experiencing it, aren't there? If you're lucky enough to live in an area where you can just throw your window open, that's great. But sometimes we do have to venture out a bit further just to get those. I mean, in this case, this kind of specialist dawn chorus, which is unique to what areas of the UK is it? It's Wales. What other parts of the UK could you come and listen to this mixture?
Yeah, so for these species, Wales is the stronghold for a lot of these species, but the temperate rainforest you get all across Western Scotland as well. Some of the distributions, things like redstart, you don't get as far north as some areas of Scotland, but you will get things like pied flycatcher and wood warbler coming up into some of those areas. And then down towards Dartmoor, parts of Exmoor and some of the sort of southwest, you get some of these species down there in the sort of relic temperate rainforests along those regions as well. And if you're generally more interested in this habitat as well, I'd really recommend having a read of Guy Shrubsole's new book, The Lost Rainforest of Britain. Really recommend that as another one to whet your appetite for these amazing places.
Absolutely, because we don't think of us having rainforests, but they're there. The remains of them are there. The wood warbler, I think, is probably my favourite. The others are quite pretty, really pretty, obviously. But the wood warbler is that sound of the spinning coin that I just think is incredible.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's quite a different character of sound as well. It's more mechanical than it is musical. It's got that just a very different quality to it that's pierces through the forest. And a lot of people have been asking me here in the valley the last few weeks, I've been hearing this bird in the woodland, really no idea what it is, and it's been the wood warbler. Quite a good one to learn, I think. So yeah, definitely worth keeping an ear out for.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got a few questions in. So one I'm going to throw over to you, Tash and Ben, in a second is this is from Irene. And it is, do males and females have different songs? Now, John, who's working incredibly hard behind the scenes, says mainly it's the males, but female robins do sing. And obviously both sexes of birds have calls. What would you say? Is it just robins? I think it probably is, isn't it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if Tash wants to input on this one at all, but just from my own understanding, it's a really fascinating topic, and is quite dependent on where you are in the world. So in the tropical regions and sort of in rainforest environments, you have a lot of males and females that sort of defend their own territories together and sing, both of them. And females usually have the physiology to be able to sing, but because of the breeding situations in the northern hemispheres, tends to be more the males that actually sing. But over the winter, things like the robin, you do get sort of females doing some song, but I don't know if you've got any input on that, Tash.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ben's spot on. I think typically in the UK it's the males because they want to attract all the ladies. But abroad and in tropical regions, literally as Ben just said, you often see it's both of them, but really species dependent, I think. But yeah.
Which reminds me, actually, not all birds sing, obviously, to mark their territories. And woodpeckers drum, don't they? They sort of whack their beaks against any solid surface, whether that's a tree or a building or a lamppost or something. I'm sure I read somewhere that female great spotted woodpeckers drum as well, but I don't know. We'll have to check that one afterwards. But that is their equivalent of song, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. It's brilliant to hear. Actually, it tends to be stronger in February. You'll hear them drumming at the moment, but February is a sort of peak time to hear great spotted woodpeckers. And we do have lesser spotted woodpeckers here in mid Wales, but very, very small populations. And they've got a slightly different drumming sound. It's a bit thinner, longer, and a bit weedy. Just not particularly loud.
Worth remembering that the woodpecker would probably object to us saying International Dawn Chorus Days in May, because they would be, no, we've done this, we've moved on, we're already ready. We're going to move on now to Axel and Ariel Drioli, who are avid explorers and naturalists. They've been following the stories of birds on the East Atlantic Flyway, and I should just briefly explain what that is. The East Atlantic Flyway is basically the sort of superhighway above our heads that we don't ever see or really think about, but that's where birds are traveling down from the north through the UK, south, back up again. And these are birds that could be nesting anywhere along that flyway, but they use that route to travel. Now, Axel and Ari are following them, and we're going to hear a little bit more about their journey now, and then we're going to have a little chat with them afterwards.
Hello, I'm Axel. I'm a wildlife sound recordist and sound designer.
My name is Ario, and I am a wildlife photographer and graphic designer.
Sounding Wild is our production brand. We believe people need healthy nature, so we create immersive experiences to inspire them to reconnect to it.
Wings Across Continent is 1.5-year expedition following the bird migration on the East Atlantic Flyway between the UK and South Africa.
Every month, we stop at a different migration hotspot, spending the first 3 weeks capturing the stories of local migratory birds, and then sharing them with locals and tourists with our innovative Sounding Wild immersive experience.
In February 2023, we started our journey from Doñana, south of Spain, following the bird migrating to Europe during spring.
Then we moved to Evoa, located in the biggest wetland in Portugal, and we are currently in Aigomos de l'Empordà in North Catalonia. It's been so exciting to experience the migration unfold, seeing and hearing species reaching Europe, and we've been asked to share some of them with you to celebrate the International Dawn Chorus Day. Birds often migrate close to human settlements in search of food and nesting sites. Black kites glide through the Gibraltar Strait to Europe to nest, and their distinctive whistling, vibrating calls can be heard close to Evoa near Lisbon. Water is vital to life, and wetlands provide abundant food for migratory black-tailed godwits, which migrate from West Africa up to Iceland. Observed in Doñana too early to vocalize, we heard them then a month later while feeding in Evoa before their migration journey towards the north. We all use natural resources to build our houses, but house martins have a special skill: mud craftwork. They build nests one close to the other, nowadays on buildings of any kind, like in Doñana. Their chatty, cute vocalizations fill the air during the day in small villages all around Europe and the UK. On our first day at Evoa, surrounded by a sea of yellow flowers, we heard a clear two-tone call that stood out from the rest. It was a western yellow wagtail, likely claiming its territory or calling for its mate. Animal calls have long inspired music, with certain birds even serving as inspiration for entire compositions. One of the most influential birds, with its complex vocabulary of more than 1,000 syllables, is the common nightingale.
Migratory bird voices are beautiful, aren't they?
They are, and they're also telling us something else. They have to change the migration pattern to adapt to a fast-changing planet, as they are migrating earlier each year.
Are we going to listen to them? Our goal is to amplify their voices.
You, Axel and Aria. That was beautiful. Thank you. That's just the most beautiful little film. And I'd like to report that the house martins appeared back on our estates just yesterday. So it's nice to see them flitting around the rooftops trying to find a home, as they do at this time of year. Now, really, really interested in your journey. I have so many questions. My first one is about Doñana, which is this really precious wetland. And you've experienced firsthand some of the issues it's been facing, haven't you?
Yeah, we did. Unfortunately, yeah, this year, literally half of the migratory birds stayed in Doñana over winter. It's completely dry. The whole park, natural park is dry. And it's something that, you know, in February, it should have been full of water, and at least like literally talking about 20 centimeters of water, but it was completely dry. So yeah, it's not ideal, not really a great situation. And yeah, it's multiple things: climate change, agricultural exploitation of natural resources like water. So yeah, it's a tough scenario really there now.
Yeah, really hard situation. And that's not the only challenge that birds are facing on this this route, is it?
No. Well, what else? Well, there is the habitat loss, definitely. You know, they're losing valuable habitat. The more habitat we take from them, the less spaces they have to nest or just to do their stopovers. Rising temperatures, you know, or like, yeah. What else would you add?
Basically, when birds stop to the hotspots, they stop for feeding, and if it's not the forest or the wetland, it's just no nature around. So they try to go further down in the flyway, and it's always a changing.
Yeah,
it's quite.
We also notice, I think, certain, like, to us, they look like a good positive stories. Like last year, the first colony of bee eaters nesting in Norfolk, right? And we're like, yes, they're nesting in Norfolk, but actually, they should usually bee eaters nest south of Europe. So that means they're going further and further up, looking for more like looking for the right habitat. They mostly migrate because of food, from what we understood, talking about to local experts. So yeah, that these like positive, seeming positive news, they're actually not that positive, unfortunately.
I think all of this reminds us that birds don't know borders, do they? I mean, something that affects a bird on this migration route in Southern Europe, in Africa, we're going to see that impact here as well, and same to the north as well. So all sorts of issues going on. What's been your best experience so far? We've talked about some of the worst, but what's been your best experience on your travels so far?
You understand?
Well, for me, the best experience was finding randomly a great spotted cuckoo. When I was around Doñana, and I was with my car. I was going back from a hike. I was coming back from the campsite to the campsite, and I spotted something that flew in front of my car, following the road, and I was like, "Oh, whoa, what is that?" It wasn't looking like a pigeon or a sparrow, and I approached it really slowly with the car. And I saw this bird that I'd never seen, and I was pretty amazed for that. And my camera, of course, was in the back of the car. So if I opened the door, I scared the bird, and I lose the occasion. So I crawl behind the car really silently, and I try to take my camera out, and I just took a lot of good pictures and videos. But it was quite a nice experience for me.
What a treat. And great spotted cuckoo, is that related to the cuckoo that we would see in the UK?
I'm not sure about that. I think so. What do you think?
We can check afterwards, but I think it is.
Yeah, later. Yeah, that is cool.
They look really different, and they sound completely different. So it's not something that you recognize as a cuckoo, or you say that it's a cuckoo. It's actually looking quite different, but yeah.
What about the best kind of sounds you've heard so far? Because you've shown us the nightingale, which is, that's just such a wonderful thing to hear. Yeah. Has that been one of the best ones you've come across?
Well, I mean, literally this morning, we are here in Nagomos de l'Empordà, and we hear nightingales like house sparrows in the UK. It's crazy, and they sing the whole day. They almost become annoying at some point because there's just too many, and don't know where to record. It's like they're everywhere. It's amazing. But I think, well, I was really, really impressed with the great reed warbler, which is different from the reed warbler that comes to the UK, which is the Eurasian one. The great reed warbler sounds a bit more, has this crackly like beginning, like at the beginning, and it has like this constant call, which is it sounds a bit weird, a bit like a grater. But yeah, I just like, it doesn't necessarily need to sound like a beautiful, poetic, melodic, romantic sound like nightingale. I mean, I like that sort of like, maybe because I like also electronic music, so that like
I'd love to hear if someone could sample one and make a little dance track out of it. So great reed warblers do occasionally pop up in the UK, and my colleague Luke's just pointed out there is one at RSPB Ham Wall at this very moment. So yeah, a lovely thing to see and unusual thing to hear. And then some of the other birds in your video, we saw the godwits there, and I was saying earlier that woodpeckers have their own version of song. What do wading birds do? I mean, they have calls, don't they? But it's no actual song.
Well, they have wading birds right now. The one that you heard was them when they were feeding. Which we met black godwit also in Doñana, but it was too early for them to make any sound, and you couldn't really hear much. How you heard them sometimes, but in Doñana they were pretty active. In Évora they were pretty active, so we heard them there. But it depends. Now in the Wadensee they're gonna actually start making more their song, let's say, which tends to be more like a whistly sort of like series of notes. Rather than a song, but we still call it song because it's it's territorial, and it's to call a mate. So yeah, they're slightly different.
Yeah, I remember during the day in Évora I didn't hear that much the sound of the godwits, but because they are more active at night.
Yeah, also yeah. So they're slightly different, yeah.
And there are nocturnal calls as well, because and I know this from kind of trying to record the birds when they're flying over the house at night, migrating. So again, that's a contact call, isn't it? Slightly different.
Yes, but yeah, it's not only waders that make contact calls. Yeah, that's sort of like saying I'm here, I'm coming in a way, right? Or when they when they land or they take off, they make this vocalization. They're called contact calls. So yeah, they make also this sort of different calls. It can get really complicated after a bit in terms of when you get into the bird song business, because it's not only the song, it's the contact call, the alarm call, the song. So yeah, there are different like stages also of complexity also throughout the year. So yeah, it can get quite complicated, but yeah, it's a vocabulary. It's literally a language. They have their own cultures also. So yeah, it's amazing as soon as you start diving in.
Where's next on your journey?
Well, we go towards north, towards Wadensee. So from here in North Catalonia, we're gonna drive probably a couple of days straight. And then we're gonna go towards Wadensee, where we're gonna meet again the black-tailed godwits, definitely. They're gonna be there. And many other waders in their breeding season. So yeah, we are excited to that. And then we're gonna come to the UK in July.
What would be your best tip for getting out and listening to birdsong?
I would say pick one and learn one a day, or even to just like learn one very well, because as also Tash and Ben said, they are always slightly different. Or even the great tit can be complicated, even it can be confusing sometimes, and they all sound slightly different wherever you go. But yeah, pick one, learn one very well, and as soon as you're confident, go to the next one. So don't try to learn many of them at the same time, and use the we live in a technological world. Use the applications. There are many apps available now, Merlin ID, BirdNet, to just recognize them, and while you are there and get used to them. I think, yeah.
Really good tip. Thank you so much. So I'm going to invite Ben and Tash back on now, because I know we've got a few more questions coming in. And this one, I think, Ben, you wanted to answer. Tips for recognizing blackcap song.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's one of those ones that you will hear in, sort of in the woodlands and sort of scrubby habitats at this time of year, and they've just arrived in the last few weeks. They are quite tricky. They're a really fast-paced song. You have long periods of song followed by a pause, and then they'll start singing again. But it's almost like a robin or a blackbird sort of sped up about 25 times. It's a really fast, continuous series of really scratchy, warbling notes, given it quite an alternating pitch. So they have quite high peaks in their song. If you were to look at like a spectrogram, it's a bit all over the place. It's got loads of sort of fluid warbling tones, but it's got loads of like really scratchy stuff in there as well. It sounds like the sort of habitats that you find it in, the sort of scrubby and woodland habitats. The most similar species is like the garden warbler, and that is like a bubbling, really low sort of, there's almost like never any scratchy notes in it, and it just sort of bubbles along at a similar pace and some similar notes, but I'm pretty sure like almost never has those scratchy tones in it. So the blackcap just sounds like a really fast, continuous sort of robin or blackbird, just going. And they're very hard to spot. They're really skulky, those sort of scrub warblers, but yeah, they do take a bit, as Axel and Aria were just saying. If you hear something like that, they often erupt out of the bushes, and using like a Merlin ID app or something like that on your phone, or the BirdNet, there's a few different apps to try and record it, and then just to verify your sort of suspicions of like, oh, that sort of sounds maybe like a blackcap, and then you can get that verification, hopefully. Yeah.
And they call them the Northern Nightingale, don't they, the blackcap? So it's you find it further north, certainly in the UK, than the nightingales would go. I totally agree on the blackbird thing, because I sometimes will hear them, and they're singing around here right now, and I think, oh, is it a blackbird, or is there something more? Would you say it's more higher pitched than a blackbird as well?
Yeah, it's not got that deep sort of tones to it. Yeah, for sure.
So definitely, I mean, that's a great one to listen to. So thank you, Bethany, for that question. I'm going to throw a more difficult question out to everyone now, which is coming from Irene. Do the chicks instinctively know the song, or do parents have to teach them? Now, is it, if you're a chick growing up in a nest, is it because you're listening to your parents singing nearby? Say you're a nightingale chick, are you listening to your parent go, oh, that's what I should be singing? How does it work? Anyone know? It's a hard one. It's a really hard one, isn't it? And I think maybe we need to come back to that one. But I think my suspicion.
I have.
Go on, Ben.
Yeah. Oh, just some observations, I guess. I don't fully understand, but from my knowledge, I believe that a lot of these sort of young birds inherit some sort of rough template of what that song is for them, sort of genetically inherited. But I think certainly for species where it's a bit more dependent on mimicry, they definitely incorporate a lot of learned sort of sounds and songs into that. But just to give an example, wrens, which Tash's favorite, it's one of my favorites as well. You'll often hear in July time, after the young birds have fledged, you'll hear these really weird scratchy songs going on, and it took me a while to clock on to what they were, and it was like young wrens basically trying to sing, and it's like, oh, that's quite sweet. You're sort of, it's really not there, but they're trying. And I think I could actually hear at some points where the male, presumably the parent, I'm not entirely sure, but the male was doing its proper song, and then you'd have this scratchy version of a fledgling nearby, and then this would go on for a little bit. And I believe from some of the sort of papers that I've read as well, they'll slowly like hone that sort of song. After that rough template, they'll have a period of learning, sort of not long after fledgling, and sort of hone that song and get a bit better at it, and it slowly forms into something a bit more recognizable. But I guess it's species sort of dependent and very sort of variable as well.
Yeah, you think for a great tit or a chiffchaff, it's not going to be very difficult. But then for something like a starling, where I think they build up their repertoire over the years, don't they? Adding in more kind of impressions and things, it's going to be a lot more complicated. So there's another question here from Fiona. Now, this is an interesting one. Fiona says, I've heard that birds are singing louder because of human sound pollution. Is that largely in urban areas? And are bird songs changing because of this? So are birds adapting to the environments that we're creating?
I think that's quite an interesting dissertation topic if someone hasn't done it yet. All I've heard, I know some birds which do mimic sort of man-made or artificial sounds. So I think it's starlings. There was this train track that hadn't been it hadn't ran for years and years and years, and yet you could still hear the sound of this sort of train going, and it wasn't until that people realized it was the starlings doing it. But as I said, they hadn't, and this probably plays into the last question, that there probably is some sort of level of inheritance, because this train hadn't ran for years and years, and yet birds today are still mimicking this sound which they probably learned from their parents. So yeah, I think have been, I'm not sure whether you guys have experienced it, but yeah, I think there are some cases of birds mimicking human or man-made sounds.
And it being passed on to their culture, as we were saying.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And also one thing, well, related to noise pollution, they tend to sing louder, but I think during the pandemic, for example, we heard them more, not because they were singing louder, because there was less noise pollution. One example, this is my own theory though, I haven't checked it yet, but dawn chorus in Europe overall so far hasn't been that powerful as in the UK. And I have one of the reasons why birds sing also is to go against the other territorial birds. So if the other birds are getting louder, they are also going to start singing louder. So they all like get louder and louder. So in the UK, we have a lot of different pots where like lots of birds concentrate. So if we go to gardens, like small pots of where there are lots of birds, they all sing a lot. I never heard a dawn chorus as loud as in the UK anywhere else. So I'm guessing one of the options could be that there is less territorial dispute, let's say. So they don't have to sing as loud. That could be also noise pollution, but also we have to remember that birds hear the different, I like to call it a different time scale, even though we are in the same planet, they sing at higher pitch. So maybe they don't feel lower noise that to us sounds like noise. So it depends. There is lots of research on soundscape ecology for this sort of thing. And other animals
suffer from noise pollution for sure. Frogs.
Yeah, light pollution as well. So light pollution, I mean, I was talking about robins singing outside, that is often by a lamppost. It's often the robin is thinking it's daytime. So it's our light pollution that we're causing at night perhaps is causing birds to start a little bit earlier too. There's a really interesting question which Luke's kindly answered behind the scenes. So Brenda, when we were talking about chicks learning from their parents, Brenda's pointed out a cuckoo doesn't have its parents to learn from, of course. So Luke says, very complex topic. So obviously cuckoos, there's no way they could learn the sound from their parents. So that has to be built in. He adds, a chick never meets its parent. And to add to this, it also instinctively knows where it has to go on migration. So it has to know, no, I've got to go to the Congo rainforest. So from the Celtic rainforest to the tropical rainforest. So incredible thinking about cuckoos. That's just kind of mind blowing. So it's somehow inside that bird's head, this is the sound I have to make. Incredible to think about that one. Let's just see if we've got any more. Oh, we've had a lot. Someone said years ago we had a starling that mimicked a car alarm. Yes, so they'll do car alarms, they'll do mobile phones, they'll do human speech. Starlings are, yeah, extraordinary. Hazel says, what are other examples of, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, philopatric birds? Like the nightingale that return each year to the same territory.
Well,
I'm gonna look at philopatric. I feel we should know this word.
Yeah.
So it is yeah, as we say, it's a bird that returns to its own territory. So pretty much all the songbirds would return to where they came from, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say ringing really helps with this. You know, sort of bird ringing. So a lot of species like that have been on migration through the winter, arriving back to places like the UK. People that do ringing activities across the UK will be able to record a bit like, you know, people know the swallows come back to the same nest every year, don't they? In a lot of places, and people often await that sort of arrival to the same nest. And a lot of species do that all the way through to seabirds, literally coming back to the same burrow every year. But obviously you need dispersal as well for species to be able to spread and colonize new areas. But I'm not sure like how strong, for instance, with a blackcap, whether it just comes to the same general wood or literally the same territory. I know with pied flycatchers, they'll come back to the same nest box every year, you know, unless they've been ousted out by a great tit that's moved in before they've arrived back, sort of thing. But
I think
yeah.
I think this is why a lot of our migratory birds are so vulnerable. And I've heard this said about migratory wading birds as well. That bird, it knows one place where it breeds and it knows one place where it spends the winter. And if something changes in one of those two locations, it really will struggle to adapt. Swifts, when they come back to the UK, if their homes have been blocked off, that's it. They will keep flying against that hole trying to get in, which is absolutely heartbreaking. So I think we have to remember that those birds, that is it. That's all they know. This is where I go in winter. This is where I go in summer to breed. Really important. And Axel and Ari, you'll be seeing a lot of that on your journeys as well, I think. So I don't think we have any more big ones coming in. Kay says, I'm not convinced that birds deliberately sing softly or loudly. They just sing. Yeah, to the bird, that's exactly what's happening. You know, it's just singing. It may want to increase its volume to compete with a neighbor, perhaps. Robins, certainly, I think I've heard doing that. We've got a question about apps. Now, we don't make or sort of promote any apps ourselves for birds, and we do have a good guide to birds on the RSPB website, and on each one you can click on and you can hear the birds singing. But has anyone got any other kind of things they'd recommend?
For me, I use Xenocanto, Xeno being with an X. That's a great website, and yeah, as you said, Jamie, the RSPB website, under each sort of bird profile, it's got their song. I think those are really good to use.
Yeah, definitely. That I have that book. It's great, and I will go in touch with the guy with Adam, I think, who made it, which is great. But in terms of apps, like BirdNet, it's great. It's free to download. Merlin ID. These are the two really that will give a try. They're both available for iOS and Android.
I've just asked if we can put the link to Xenocanto in our chat, because it is a great resource actually, and it's made up by volunteer sound recorders all over the world effectively, who go and record birds and put them up there for you to listen to. And you can go on there and say, oh, I want to hear a blackbird song, I want to hear a blackbird's alarm call, I want to hear, you know, what does a blackbird sound like when it's flying at night, making one of those little migratory contact calls. So yeah, that's definitely worth looking up. really good resource. Another thing I'm just remembering, some advice Lucy Lapwing gave us in a previous webinar, was that you might want to, if you're going to learn a bird at a time, this is something we've said today, if you're going to want to learn a bird at a time and you've got a smartphone, set that call as your ringtone. Don't use it to try and, important birding point here, don't try go out and try and attract the bird during breeding season by playing its call, because that is not fair. That will cause unnecessary disturbance. But if you set it as your alarm and you wake up every morning to it, then you'll gradually get used to that sound. And that's a really good tip. And I've tried that one. So yeah, that's how I'm pretty confident with blackcap now. Thank you all for your great responses. I think we probably could wrap this up in a moment, and we are going to try and show the rest of Ben's video. So I will just say massive thank you to all our speakers, Axel, Aria, Ben and Tash. Thank you so much. That was excellent. We will post some links to useful information in the chat, including a page on our website, all about the Dawn Chorus. But now let's go over to take a look at the rest of Ben's video, and thank you all for watching. Thank you.
Just listen to that, isn't it amazing? I'm really privileged to be based in the middle of Wales, right in the heart of some of the most amazing Celtic rainforest habitats, these beautiful ancient oak and birch and hazel forests that adorn the steep-sided, really wet, wooded valleys in this part of the country. And these habitats have some amazing different bird species, some of the common garden and woodland species that you can see almost anywhere in the UK, which have been singing away very happily for the last few months and been filling the Dawn Chorus with their superb songs. But there's a really special suite of species that arrive back from their overwintering grounds very soon. In fact, I've just in this last week started hearing them again, and I'm going to be showing you a little bit about those for this year's International Dawn Chorus Day. So what are these really special species? Well, I'm going to tell you. Wood warbler, pied flycatcher and common redstart. What a selection. If you go to these forests at this time of year through April and May and June, you will hear these and you will hopefully catch a glimpse of them flitting through the greening canopy and understory of the forest. So let's start with the wood warbler. Have a listen. These lovely relatives of the chiffchaff, the willow warbler, some of these species we're really familiar with. They'll often be found just under the canopy in the understory of the forest. They love a little bit of open space and they'll often be doing a song flight from branch to branch. And they'll give off this song that it starts quite slow and ends in this beautiful trill at the very end. So it goes It's a really lovely song, very distinctive. It pierces through the sound of rivers and the sound of rustling leaves in the forest. You can really hear it through the woodland. To try and picture what that sounds like, I often think of it as like a sort of falling body of water down the river, or perhaps something falling down the stairs, or like a coin gradually coming to rest if you flipped it over. So, really beautiful song. Next up, we have the pied flycatcher. These gorgeous black and white birds flitting around the understory of these wooded environments. And they've got a really gorgeous melodic song that seems to just really fit with these amazing forests. It's got a chiming, sort of slightly sweet sounding quality to it. Have a listen to this. So it's not a huge amount of complex things going on there. It's got quite a simple structure to it. It sounds like maybe it's not putting that much energy into it. It's like bleep, 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 bleep. That's a very poor outline, but it doesn't sound particularly complex. Some elements sound a bit like great tit sometimes when it starts to sing, and it often just falls into this really lovely chiming melodic song. Some of the maybe similar species that you might hear in this sort of environment that sound similar are things like great tit doing all sorts of impersonations, and maybe some sort of warbler, a bit like maybe a blackcap or a song thrush singing away. But it's got just a really sweet sounding song, and you can often pinpoint the birds from in the understory as well. So the last of this wonderful trio of woodland species is the redstart. Really flashy red colouring underneath, often see that spark of a red tail as it flies away. And these species are dwelling more in this sort of open woodland pasture, forest edge habitats. They love a really gnarled ancient tree with lots of holes in it to nest in. And what you're listening out for this is, I like to think of it as a bit like an engine motor that's not quite caught. It always sounds like it's going to erupt into this beautiful, amazing song, and then it just doesn't quite go anywhere. Have a listen to the song. So there we have it. The pied flycatcher, the redstart and the wood warbler. These amazing 3 species that I hope have given you a little bit more insight on how to identify their song when you're next out in one of these wonderful wooded environments. But for Dawn Chorus Day and for the next few weeks, wherever you are, you don't have to live right next to an amazing woodland, just whatever green space you've got on your doorstep, I really encourage you to try and put that alarm clock on, try and make that effort to get up in the morning, even if it's just once. Get out as early as you can, 5 AM ideally at the moment, if not earlier, or you can get up a little bit later. But try and get up, get out, take a seat, just sit down and just listen to the incredible thing that is the Dawn Chorus, because this orchestra is just wonderful. It's just an incredible feat of nature that we get to witness every single year and every single morning throughout the whole of the spring. So I really encourage you to get out and just enjoy it, because it's absolutely fantastic.